Rich Cowboy took the widow to bed on a bet. What she confessed left him in shock. Epic Wild West. Jack Hollister was the kind of man who drew attention wherever he went. In the town of Dry Creek, he was well known for his wealth, his flashy clothes, and the way he carried himself like the world owed him respect. The townsfolk whispered about him behind his back, some admiring his confidence, others warning their daughters to stay away from his charm. Jack didn't care. He liked the attention, the thrill of winning, and above all, the excitement of a good bet. Life in the Wild West was unpredictable, and he had learned to take every opportunity he could. On a hot afternoon, Jack found himself in the saloon, the wooden floors creaking under the boots of cowboys, gamblers, and drifters. The smell of dust, whiskey, and horse sweat filled the air. He had just won a hand of poker, coins stacked high in front of him, when a group of men at a nearby table started talking about Clara Monroe. She was a widow who ran her late husband's ranch with determination and dignity. Some of the men mocked her for living alone, suggesting she was too proud to accept help, or too lonely to resist attention from any man with money. Jack leaned back in his chair, smirking. He liked challenges, and he liked to prove himself. His eyes studied Clara, imagining her as more than just a figure of gossip. He could see her in his mind, strong, confident, a woman who would not easily bend to anyone's will. That image sparked an idea. Reckless, maybe, but irresistible. "I bet I could win her over in 1 week," he said aloud, catching the attention of the men. The others laughed, thinking it was another of Jack's foolish boasts. "No man could charm Clara Monroe," one said. "She's tougher than any of us." Jack grinned. "Watch me. I'll show you. I'll win her respect, her trust, maybe even her friendship if she lets me." The words were meant as a joke to the others, but in Jack's mind, they became a plan. A bet had been made, not just with money, but with his own pride on the line. He didn't realize that his bet would soon lead him into a situation more complicated than he could ever imagine. Clara Monroe lived on the edge of town, a modest house surrounded by a few acres of farmland. Her home was simple but well kept, a reflection of her late husband's life and her own careful attention. She woke early each morning, tending the animals, checking the fences, and ensuring that the ranch ran smoothly. To the townsfolk, she was strong and independent, but to Jack, she seemed mysterious, a challenge that demanded respect rather than conquest. When Jack arrived at the ranch the following day, he dismounted his horse with a flourish, dust kicking up around his boots. He had dressed carefully in his finest shirt and boots, hoping to impress. Clara, meanwhile, watched from the porch, her hands folded in front of her. She did not smile. She did not greet him warmly. She merely studied him, her sharp eyes measuring the man who had dared to come to her home.
"Good afternoon, Miss Monroe," Jack said, bowing slightly.
"I was hoping we could discuss some business, perhaps the sale of some land." His voice was smooth, practiced, confident. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Land? You're a long way from any business that matters to me. What makes you think I would discuss anything with a man like you?" Jack froze for a moment, caught off guard. He had expected resistance, but not this calm, steady defiance. Clara's words were polite but firm, and they held a weight he hadn't anticipated. He forced a smile. "I assure you, I have good intentions. I only wish to discuss a fair arrangement." Clara's lips pressed together and she gestured to the door.
"Then come inside. We'll see if your intentions match your words."
As he stepped into her home, Jack noticed the simplicity of her life. The furniture was modest, the kitchen tidy, and the walls held pictures of her late husband and the ranch they had built together. Everything spoke of hard work, dedication, and care. Jack felt a flicker of admiration but quickly reminded himself of the bet, of the challenge he had taken on. Dinner was quiet at first. Clara served simple food: bread, roasted vegetables, and stew. Jack tried to make conversation, asking questions about the ranch, about her late husband, about life in Dry Creek. Clara answered politely but without much detail, her responses measured and careful. Jack sensed that this woman was not easily impressed, not easily swayed by charm or wealth. As the meal progressed, Jack began to see her in a new light. She was intelligent, observant, and strong-willed, She asked questions in return, probing him gently about his life, his ambitions, and his character. Jack, who was used to men talking endlessly about themselves, found himself on the defensive. He realized that his usual tricks, bragging about wealth or skill, would not work here. Clara Monroe was not impressed by any of that. The conversation turned to their pasts. Clara spoke carefully about her husband, about the years they had spent building the ranch, and about the challenges she faced alone after his death. Jack listened, genuinely interested, and found himself sharing pieces of his own life, stories of gambling, travel, and the lessons he had learned the hard way. For the first time, he felt a connection that was not about conquest, not about proving himself, but about understanding another person. As the night wore on, the fire crackled in the hearth, and Jack felt a strange respect for Clara growing inside him. He realized that what he had thought would be a simple bet, a game, a challenge, was turning into something far more complicated. This woman, with her quiet strength and sharp mind, was unlike anyone he had ever met. Clara noticed the change in him as well. She saw the arrogance fade, replaced by curiosity, hesitation, and a hint of admiration. But she remained cautious, aware that Jack's reputation preceded him. She allowed him to stay the night, but only under the guise of continuing their discussion about business. She was careful, measured, never letting him assume more than he had earned. Jack settled into a small guest room, his mind racing. He had thought he could charm Clara, win a bet, and return to town victorious. Now he realized he had underestimated her. He lay awake, thinking about her words, her presence, and the sense of honesty she carried that seemed to challenge every one of his assumptions. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the ranch was quiet. Inside, both Jack and Clara contemplated the unexpected complexity of the evening. Jack, for the first time in a long while, felt humility. Clara, for the first time in a long while, felt a curiosity about a man she had assumed would be like all the others, self-centered, reckless, and blind to the lives of others. By the time morning came, the bet that had seemed simple and trivial the day before felt heavy on Jack's shoulders. He realized that winning over Clara Monroe would require more than charm or wealth. It would require honesty, respect, and perhaps a change in himself. Clara, meanwhile, prepared breakfast with her usual diligence, her eyes occasionally glancing at Jack, studying the man who had come into her home with a wager in mind and had left the evening with something far more complicated, an awareness that she was not to be underestimated. The first part of their story ended not with a confrontation, but with understanding. Two people different in many ways, beginning a journey that neither had anticipated. Jack had come to Dry Creek with a bet in mind. He left the first night with a new respect for a widow whose strength and courage were far more valuable than any coin. And Clara, who had faced the loss of her husband and the challenges of life alone, saw in Jack a potential for growth, perhaps even redemption. The sun rose over the ranch, casting golden light across the fields. Horses grazed quietly, and the wind carried the scent of dust and grass. In that moment, both Jack and Clara understood that their story was only beginning, and that the coming days would test their strength, their patience, and their ability to see beyond first impressions. And so, in the quiet of the Wild West, a wealthy cowboy and a determined widow began a journey together, neither knowing how it would unfold, but both aware that this encounter would change them forever. The morning sun spilled across the ranch, painting the land in shades of gold and amber. Clara Monroe moved quietly through her home, carrying bowls of fresh eggs and bread to the small table. Jack Hollister, still adjusting to the unfamiliar routine of a ranch life, followed her cautiously. The night before had been unlike anything he had expected. No laughter at jokes, no shallow flirtation, only honest conversation and the quiet awareness that he was in the presence of someone extraordinary. Breakfast was a simple affair. Clara placed the food carefully on the table, her hands steady and precise. Jack watched her, noticing the care in her movements, the way she seemed to command the space without arrogance. He realized that she carried more than the loss of a husband. She carried responsibility, resilience, and an unspoken strength that made him pause.
"You're quiet this morning," Clara said, glancing at him over the rim of her coffee cup.
Is that your usual way of speaking when you visit someone's home? Jack chuckled lightly.
I suppose it is, though I admit I'm still learning the ways of a ranch. Life here is
different from what I'm used to. Clara nodded. Different, yes, but it's honest. Every task has a purpose, and every action has consequences. There's no hiding behind wealth or charm here. You'll learn that quickly if you plan to stay. Jack smiled, feeling a mixture of admiration and unease. He had assumed that winning her respect would be simple, a matter of charm and confidence. Now he realized that the challenge was far greater than he had imagined. Clara Monroe was not a woman to be fooled or swayed by appearances. She required sincerity, patience, and effort. After breakfast, Clara suggested they begin work on the ranch. Jack followed her outside, adjusting his hat against the sun. The land stretched wide, dotted with horses grazing peacefully, fences that needed repairing, and fields waiting to be tended. Clara handed Jack a hammer and a coil of wire. "Fences first," she said, her voice firm but calm. "If the boundaries aren't secure, nothing else matters. The animals must be protected, and so must the land. Are you ready?" Jack nodded, trying to mask the hesitation he felt. The work was harder than he had expected. Hammering posts into the ground, tightening wire, and navigating the uneven terrain made him sweat and strain muscles he hadn't used in years. Clara moved beside him effortlessly, her hands skilled and precise.
"You're slower than I expected," she said, not unkindly but with a hint of amusement.
Jack laughed, wiping his forehead. "It's been a while since I've done hard labor. I suppose I'm not as strong as I thought." Clara smiled briefly. "Strength isn't just about muscles. It's about endurance, patience, and determination. You'll learn that soon enough." As they worked together, Jack began to notice other details about Clara. She had a sharp mind, noticing small gaps in the fences before they caused problems, organizing tasks efficiently, and managing the ranch with a quiet authority. Her presence commanded respect, not through fear, but through competence and dedication. Jack realized that the stories he had heard in the saloon did not capture the full picture. Clara Monroe was more than the widow of a rancher. She was a leader in her own right. During a break, they sat under the shade of an old oak tree, drinking water and catching their breath. Jack took the opportunity to ask Clara more about her life. "How did you manage the ranch after your husband passed?" he asked. "It must have been difficult running everything alone." Clara's eyes softened slightly, and she looked toward the horizon. "It was difficult. Some days felt impossible. But I made promises to my husband, to the land, and to myself. I couldn't let the ranch fail, and I couldn't let myself fail. I learned quickly that every choice has weight, and every action matters." Jack listened, impressed by her determination. He felt a twinge of guilt for the bet he had made in the saloon. What had started as a wager now seemed shallow and careless, compared to the depth of Clara's life experiences. "You've carried a heavy burden," Jack said quietly. "I can see why people respect you, even if they don't say it." Clara looked at him sharply, studying his expression. "Do you mean that, or is that another line to flatter me?" Jack shook his head. "I mean it, truly." For a moment, the air between them was charged with a different energy, a recognition of each other's humanity. Jack felt a stirring of respect, even admiration, and Clara felt a cautious curiosity about this man who had come into her life with arrogance but now seemed willing to learn. The afternoon brought new tasks. They fed the horses, checked the water troughs, and inspected the fields for any signs of trouble. As they worked, Jack noticed Clara speaking to the animals in a soft, commanding tone. The horses responded calmly to her presence, trusting her guidance. Jack realized that her strength was not only in her hands, but in her ability to connect with the life around her. During a brief rest, Jack asked about her late husband. "Did he teach you everything you know about the ranch?" Clara's expression softened, a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow in her eyes. "He taught me what he could, but I had to learn most of it myself. Life on the ranch doesn't forgive mistakes. You either adapt or you fail. I learned early that independence was not a choice, it was a necessity. Jack nodded, absorbing her words. He felt humbled by her resilience and by the quiet dignity with which she carried her past. It was clear to him that any attempt to win her over through charm alone would fail. Respect and trust could not be bought. They had to be earned. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara and Jack finished the day's work. The ranch looked orderly, the fences secure and the animals calm. They stood together surveying the land, sharing a moment of quiet satisfaction. "You did well today," Clara said, her tone approving but not overly generous. "You're learning, even if slowly." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment he hadn't expected.
Thanks to your guidance. I can see why people trust you to manage all of this alone.
Clara looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. Trust must be earned, not given lightly. You're learning that now, I hope.
Jack nodded. He understood that the journey he had begun with the bet was evolving into something much more profound.
He was beginning to see the value of hard work, honesty, and genuine connection. Clara Monroe was not just a challenge, she was a teacher, showing him that respect and integrity mattered far more than wealth or bravado. As night fell, Clara prepared a modest dinner, and they shared it quietly, the air filled with the sounds of the ranch at rest. The stars emerged, shining brightly in the clear western sky, casting a calm glow over the land. Jack found himself thinking about the bet, about the assumptions he had made, and about the depth of character he had discovered in Clara. For the first time, he realized that the wager was no longer relevant. What mattered now was understanding her, respecting her, and perhaps learning from her example. Clara, in turn, watched him with cautious interest, noting the changes in his demeanor and the subtle hints of sincerity in his actions. That night, Jack retired to the small guest room once again, reflecting on the day. He had expected to charm Clara with confidence and wit, but he had learned that true connection required more: patience, effort, and honesty. He felt a mixture of humility and curiosity, wondering what the coming days would bring. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and the ranch was quiet, alive only with the soft sounds of animals and the distant hoot of an owl. Inside, both Clara and Jack contemplated the unexpected bond forming between them. It was a bond built not on wagers or arrogance, but on mutual recognition of strength, responsibility, and the human capacity for growth. As he drifted to sleep, Jack knew that the challenge he had undertaken was no longer a bet. It was a journey to understand, respect, and perhaps, in time, earn the trust of a remarkable woman who had faced life's hardships with courage and dignity. The Wild West stretched endlessly beyond the walls of the ranch, filled with opportunities, challenges, and the promise of change. And for Jack Hollister and Clara Monroe, the story was only beginning. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh hay and the distant river. Jack Hollister rose early, as he had learned he must if he wanted to keep pace with Clara Monroe. Life on the ranch was not like the easy days in the saloon or the comfortable rooms of a wealthy home. Every task required attention, effort, and care, and Clara made sure he understood that. She was already outside, tending to the horses, her movements confident and practiced. Jack joined her quietly, adjusting his sleeves, feeling the sun on his back. He had grown used to the early hours, the physical work, and the steady rhythm of ranch life. He was beginning to understand that the value of a day's work was not measured in money, but in the tangible results of effort and patience. The fences were mended, the animals fed, and the fields checked, and yet Clara remained restless, moving from task to task with the precision of someone who knew that small details mattered. "You've improved since yesterday," Clara said, glancing at him as she tied a halter on a young horse. "You're slower than I am, but I can see you're trying." Jack nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I have to try." "I'd hate to give you a reason to think I'm careless." Clara's eyes softened slightly. "Carelessness isn't just dangerous for the animals. It can ruin everything. You learn quickly here, or you fail." Jack watched her work and realized that her life was a constant balance of responsibility and resilience. Every choice had weight. Every action had consequence. He began to respect her more than he had thought possible. This was no ordinary widow. This was a woman who had survived loss and built a life from the pieces left behind. And she did so with determination and integrity. As they paused for a break, Clara asked him to sit on a bench under a large oak tree. She handed him a water jug, then took a seat herself, letting the quiet of the morning settle around them. "You've asked me about my husband before," Clara began slowly, "but there are things you don't know, things that shaped who I am today." Jack leaned forward, curious. He sensed that she was about to share something important, something more personal than she had revealed before. "My husband taught me many things, of course," she continued. "But he also left me with responsibilities I hadn't anticipated. When he passed, the ranch didn't just belong to me. It became a test of my strength, my judgment, and my ability to persevere." Jack listened intently. He had seen widows before, women who had lost husbands and struggled quietly, but Clara's story felt different. Her grief had not made her bitter. It had made her strong. Her independence was not a shield. It was a tool, a way to navigate a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. "I had to learn quickly," Clara said, her voice steady, "that the land will not wait for you to be ready. The animals will not care about your sorrow. Every day brings new challenges, and you either face them or fail. I chose to face them." Jack felt a pang of guilt. He had come into her life with a wager in mind, thinking that winning her attention would be easy. Now, he realized how shallow that thought had been. Clara had already faced more in her life than he had imagined in his years of wealth and reckless bets. "You're stronger than I ever expected," Jack admitted quietly. "And I'm beginning to understand that a bet has no place here. Respect and trust, those are the things that matter." Clara looked at him, her eyes searching his face.
"Do you understand that now, or is it just something you say?"
Jack met her gaze, feeling the weight of honesty in her question.
I understand it, truly.
"I see now that a wager meant nothing. You are remarkable, and I've been foolish to think otherwise." For the first time, a subtle smile touched Clara's lips. She nodded slightly, acknowledging his sincerity. It was not praise, not yet, but recognition that he was beginning to see her clearly. The day's work continued, and Jack found himself learning from Clara in ways he hadn't anticipated. She showed him how to calm the horses when they grew restless, how to check fences for weak spots, and how to read the land for signs of trouble. Every lesson carried more than practical knowledge. It carried wisdom, patience, and a deep understanding of responsibility. During a quiet moment, Clara paused and asked Jack about his own past. "You've spoken of wealth and games, but tell me about the man behind that. Who are you when no one is watching?"
Jack hesitated.
He had never been asked that question before, not genuinely. Most people were interested in what he had, what he could offer, or how he could entertain them. Clara's question required honesty. I've spent most of my life chasing excitement," Jack admitted. "Gambling, traveling, winning, losing. I thought that was enough. But now I see it wasn't. I've never had a reason to settle, to invest myself in something real. Until now, I suppose." Clara listened without interrupting. There was no judgment in her eyes, only understanding and a quiet patience. Jack realized that she had learned to listen carefully, to weigh words before responding, and to judge people not by appearances, but by their actions. "You're beginning to see," Clara said softly, "that life isn't about winning or losing in games. It's about learning, growing, and taking responsibility for the choices you make. That is the only way to truly earn respect." Jack nodded, feeling a mixture of humility and determination. He had entered Clara's life with a wager in mind, but now he was learning that respect was not won in a single evening. It was earned over days, actions, and honest effort. The afternoon brought more challenges. A young colt had gotten loose, running near the edge of the river. Clara moved quickly, instructing Jack to help, guiding the horse with calm authority. Together, they managed to corral the colt, returning it safely to the pen. Jack marveled at her skill and patience, realizing that her strength was both physical and emotional. She could manage animals, land, and people with equal precision. As they returned to the house, Jack felt a growing admiration for Clara. She was not just the widow he had heard about in the saloon. She was a leader, a protector, and a teacher. He had thought the bet would be simple, a game of charm and confidence. Now he understood that winning her trust would require something far deeper: honesty, effort, and genuine understanding. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Clara prepared another simple meal. They ate together in quiet companionship, the day's work settling into a rhythm of mutual respect. Jack felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a growing awareness of how much he had yet to learn. After dinner, they walked toward the barn, checking the animals one last time. The quiet of the night settled over the ranch, broken only by the soft sounds of hooves and the distant call of a night bird. Jack realized that he had been given a rare glimpse into Clara's world, a world of responsibility, resilience, and unwavering dedication. As they paused by the fence, Clara turned to him. "You've learned more than most men in a week," she said. "But there is still much to understand. The land, the animals, the people who depend on you. All of it requires more than effort. It requires care, consistency, and honesty." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had thought he could charm her, win a bet, and leave with nothing but pride. Now he knew that the journey was far more complex. To earn her respect, he would need to be sincere, patient, and willing to change. That night, as he lay in the small guest room, Jack reflected on the day. Clara's life had been shaped by hardship, responsibility, and loss, yet she carried herself with grace and strength. He had entered her life with arrogance, but he was leaving it with humility and a deep respect for the woman she had become. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the cool scent of evening. The stars appeared one by one, shining over the ranch and the wide open land. Jack thought of the bet, the wager that had brought him here, and realized that it no longer mattered. What mattered now was understanding, respect, and the potential for genuine connection. Clara, in her room nearby, thought of the day as well. She had seen a new side of Jack, a side that could learn, adapt, and show respect. She remained cautious, aware that change could be temporary, but she allowed herself a quiet curiosity. Perhaps this man, who had come into her life with folly in mind, could grow into someone worthy of trust. And so the third day of their journey ended not with confrontation, but with understanding. Jack had begun to see beyond appearances and wagers, learning that respect and trust were earned through actions, honesty, and humility. Clara, in turn, observed the man who had entered her life carelessly and began to see the possibility of growth, change, and perhaps even partnership. The ranch was quiet now, the animals resting, and the land bathed in the silver glow of moonlight. Two lives were quietly intersecting, each learning from the other, each beginning a journey that neither had anticipated. And as the night deepened, both Jack and Clara understood that the days to come would challenge them, teach them, and reveal truths they could not yet imagine. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the first light stretching across the ranch like a golden blanket. Jack Hollister rose with a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. The routines of the ranch had begun to sink into his bones, waking early, working hard, and learning to see the land not as something to own, but something to care for. Clara Monroe was already outside, her movements purposeful as she checked the horses in the corral. Jack followed, carrying a bundle of feed. He had learned to anticipate her instructions, to act with efficiency, and to respect her authority. Yesterday had been a lesson in patience and observation. Today promised to be a test of his commitment. Clara noticed his efforts. "You've improved," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You're beginning to understand that the ranch demands attention at every moment. Nothing waits for you to catch up." Jack nodded, setting the feed in the troughs. "I'm learning. Slowly, but I'm learning." Clara smiled faintly. "Slowly is acceptable. as long as you're consistent. A mistake here or there is forgivable, but negligence is not. The animals, the land, everything depends on care and diligence. As the day progressed, Jack and Clara moved from task to task. They repaired fences along the western boundary, tended the garden, and ensured that the horses and cattle were healthy and secure. Jack was beginning to appreciate the rhythm of ranch life, the satisfaction of work that had tangible results, the quiet pride of responsibility, and the deep respect that came from earning trust through effort rather than wealth or charm. During a short break, Clara leaned against the fence and studied Jack. "You've changed," she observed. "You came here thinking this would be a game." "Now I see that you're beginning to understand what responsibility means." Jack smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. "I didn't realize how different life could be. This work, it matters in a way that I never understood before. And I respect you for showing me." Clara's eyes softened slightly. "Respect must be earned, not given lightly. You're on the right path, but there's more to learn. True respect comes from consistent action, not words." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by a commotion near the southern edge of the ranch. Voices shouted in the distance, sharp and urgent. Jack and Clara exchanged a glance. "Go see what it is," Clara instructed, her tone firm. "I'll secure the animals." His heart pounding. As he rounded a corner, he saw a group of men from a neighboring ranch, their expressions hard and unfriendly. One of them was waving a piece of paper, a claim to part of Clara's land. "This land belongs to us now," one of the men announced, his voice loud and commanding. "Your claim is invalid. Hand it over." Jack felt a surge of anger on Clara's behalf. These men had no right to challenge her, no right to threaten her property or livelihood. He stepped forward, trying to keep his voice calm but firm. "This land belongs to Clara Monroe," he said. "She has managed it honestly and with care. You have no right to take it." The men laughed, a harsh and mocking sound. "Who are you to interfere? You're just a visitor. You think your words mean anything here?" Jack squared his shoulders. "I may be a visitor, but I will not stand by while you threaten someone who has done nothing but work hard and act honorably. Leave or face the consequences of your actions." The men hesitated, sizing him up. Jack could feel their doubt. He was not the wealthiest man here, nor the strongest in terms of sheer size, but his confidence and willingness to stand for what was right gave him a presence they could not ignore. Meanwhile, Clara had joined him, her calm authority adding weight to his words. "This land has been my responsibility since my husband passed," she said, her voice steady. "I will defend it, and I expect the same from anyone who respects me and my work." They had come expecting an easy confrontation, but the combination of Clara's authority and Jack's determination gave them pause. Slowly they backed away, muttering threats that were more bark than bite, before finally retreating toward their own ranch. Jack exhaled relief and adrenaline mixing in his chest. "That could have gone worse," he said, shaking his head. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of reassurance. "You acted well. Courage and honesty are more important than strength alone. Today you've earned a small measure of respect, not just from me, but from this land." Jack felt a surge of pride, but it was tempered by humility. He had learned that standing up for what was right was not about bravado or winning a bet. It was about doing what was necessary, even when the outcome was uncertain. The rest of the afternoon passed with less tension, though the event had left its mark. Jack and Clara returned to the barn to check the animals, ensuring that none had been disturbed by the commotion. Jack noticed the way Clara moved, efficient and calm, even under pressure. He realized that her strength was not only in her ability to manage the ranch, but in her ability to remain composed when faced with threats. "You handled yourself well," Clara said as they finished their tasks. "Standing up to others is not easy, especially when they think they have power over you. You proved that actions speak louder than words." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her praise. "I'm learning from the best," he said sincerely. "Your strength, it's inspiring. I've never met anyone like you." Clara studied him carefully. "Strength alone is not enough," she said.
It must be paired with integrity and compassion. Today you showed glimpses of that.
Keep it up, and perhaps you'll earn more than just my respect. Jack smiled, feeling a mix of relief and determination. He understood that his journey was far from over. Respect, trust, and connection were earned slowly, through consistent effort and genuine care. The bet he had made in the saloon seemed trivial now, a foolish start to something far more important. As evening approached, they worked together to repair a damaged section of fence near the northern boundary. Jack's movements were more confident, guided by lessons from the morning and Clara's steady oversight. Clara moved beside him, offering advice and correction when needed, but never overbearing. The rhythm of their work was almost meditative, the shared effort building an unspoken bond between them. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, Clara and Jack paused to admire their work. The ranch was secure, the animals calm, and the fences strong. Jack felt a deep satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment that came not from wealth or victory, but from effort, honesty, and shared purpose. Clara looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "You've done well today, not just in action, but in understanding what it means to care for this land and its people." Jack met her gaze, feeling a mixture of pride and humility.
I see now that the bet meant nothing.
What matters is respect, honesty, and commitment. I want to keep learning, not for a wager, but for something real. Clara's eyes softened, her expression thoughtful. Good. That is the only path worth taking. Actions, integrity, and sincerity, those are the things that build trust. Keep that in mind, and you may find more than you expect here. As night fell, the ranch settled into quiet. The stars emerged one by one, twinkling over the wide open land. Jack and Clara moved through their final evening chores, their movements synchronized by shared effort and mutual respect. For the first time, Jack felt a true sense of belonging, not just on the ranch but in the rhythm of honest work and genuine connection. Later, as they sat by the fireplace eating a simple dinner, Jack reflected on the day's events. The threat from the neighboring ranchers had tested his courage and commitment, but it had also shown him the value of integrity and loyalty. Clara had faced challenges far greater than anything he had encountered, yet she had met them with calm authority and unwavering resolve. He realized that the bet, the wager he had made so carelessly, was irrelevant. What mattered now was earning respect, demonstrating honesty, and learning from a remarkable woman who had shown him a new way to live. Clara, in turn, observed him with cautious approval, noting the changes in his demeanor, the sincerity in his words, and the effort he had shown. The fourth day of their journey ended not with triumph or conquest, but with understanding and growth. Jack had begun to prove himself not through charm or wealth, but through courage, action, and honesty. Clara had begun to see that the man who had arrived with arrogance could also possess the qualities of loyalty, respect, and integrity. Outside, the night was still and quiet. The ranch bathed in the silver glow of moonlight. Jack lay in the guest room, reflecting on the day and the lessons he had learned. The Wild West stretched endlessly beyond the ranch, full of challenges, opportunities, and the promise of change. He understood now that the true measure of a man was not in his wealth or bravado, but in his willingness to act rightly, to protect those who depended on him, and to earn trust through consistent effort. Clara, in her room nearby, thought of the events with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had tested Jack, seen how he responded to pressure, and observed the beginnings of growth and understanding. She remained cautious, but the seeds of respect and trust were taking root. Perhaps, she thought, this man could become more than a visitor. He could become a partner in the true sense of the word. And so, the fourth day ended with quiet reflection and mutual recognition. Both Jack and Clara had faced challenges, learned lessons, and discovered truths about themselves and each other. The days to come promised more trials, revelations, and opportunities for growth, but for now they rested with the knowledge that courage, honesty, and integrity had begun to forge a bond that could not easily be broken. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, bathing the land in soft golden light. Jack Hollister stepped out of the guest room with a sense of anticipation he had never felt before. The previous days had tested him in ways he had not expected, and today he knew, would bring the final lesson of this journey. Clara Monroe was already outside, walking among the horses, her presence calm yet commanding. Jack joined her silently, carrying a bucket of feed. The ranch had become a place of learning, humility, and reflection for him. He no longer thought of his arrival as a simple wager or a game. Every day, every task, and every interaction had taught him the value of respect, responsibility, and honest effort. He had grown in ways he hadn't thought possible, and Clara had been the guide, whether she realized it or not. "You seem ready today," Clara said, her voice soft but firm. She had a thoughtful look in her eyes, as though she was weighing something important. Jack nodded. "I am. I think I understand what's important now, what really matters." Clara studied him for a moment, then turned and walked toward the barn. "Then come with me. There is something you need to see, something I've kept from everyone until now." Jack followed her, curiosity growing with every step. They reached a small fenced area at the edge of the property, where the sunlight illuminated the land with a warm glow. Clara paused and gestured for him to sit on a nearby bench. "This land," she began, her voice calm, "is more than a ranch. It was my husband's life's work, and now it is mine. But there is something you should know, something I've never told anyone outside of my family." Jack leaned forward, sensing the gravity in her tone. Clara Monroe rarely showed vulnerability, yet today there was an openness he had not seen before. "When my husband and I first acquired this land," Clara continued, "he had plans for the ranch that went beyond what most people could see. He wanted it to be a place where struggling families could find work, where the community could thrive, and where the land itself would be respected and preserved. When he passed, I promised him that I would honor that vision." Jack listened intently, feeling a growing admiration for her. He realized that her strength was not just in her ability to manage the ranch, but in her dedication to a purpose greater than herself. "I also knew," Clara said, her eyes meeting his, "that the land was valuable, and many people might try to take advantage of it. That is why I have been cautious, why I have been careful about who I let into this part of my life." "I did not trust easily, not because I am cold, but because I have seen what greed and selfishness can do." Jack felt a pang of guilt. He remembered the wager he had made, the thoughtless challenge in the saloon. What had started as a reckless bet now seemed shallow and foolish compared to the depth of Clara's life and responsibilities. "I'm listening," he said quietly. "Please, tell me everything." Clara took a deep breath. "When you arrived here, I knew you were different. I sensed that beneath your wealth and bravado, there was a man capable of change, capable of respect. But I needed to see it for myself. That is why I allowed you to stay, why I involved you in the work. I wanted to know if you could rise to the challenge, if you could act with honesty and integrity when it mattered most." Jack was stunned. He had suspected she might have known something, but he had never imagined the depth of her insight. "I didn't realize you knew about the bet," he said, his voice low with surprise. Clara smiled faintly. "I knew, and I wanted to see how you would respond." "Would you take the easy path, or would you rise to meet the responsibilities in front of you? So far, you have shown courage, effort, and a willingness to learn. That is more than many men I have known." Jack felt a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. He had come into her life thinking of conquest, of winning a challenge, and now he realized that the real victory was understanding her, respecting her, and proving himself worthy through action. Clara stood, walking to the fence and gesturing to the fields beyond. "There is one more thing you must understand: the land, the ranch, and the work we do here. It is not just about survival. It is about trust, community, and commitment. I have kept it running through hard work, careful planning, and respect for everyone who depends on it. That is the true measure of success." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had learned many lessons over the past days, but this was the most important. True respect, trust, and connection could not be won through charm or wagers. They were earned through consistent effort, integrity, and care for others. "I understand," he said, his voice steady.
I see now that the bet meant nothing.
What matters is honesty, effort, and respect.
And I want to continue learning, not for a wager, but because I want to be worthy of your trust. Clara studied him carefully, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and approval. Words are easy, Jack. Actions are what count. But I see that you are sincere. That is a good beginning.
The morning passed with shared work and quiet reflection. Jack helped repair a section of fence, tended the garden, and fed the animals alongside Clara. Every task was an opportunity to demonstrate his commitment, and he worked diligently, not for praise but because he understood the importance of the land and the responsibility it carried. By midday, a sense of calm settled over the ranch. Jack and Clara paused by the old oak tree, taking a moment to rest and enjoy the view of the field stretching out under the sun.
"There is something else," Clara said, her voice gentle but serious.
"I have faced challenges before, but I needed to see how you would respond to pressure. The men who tried to claim my land, they tested you as much as me. You stood firm, honestly and courageously. That is a rare quality, Jack. Most men would have given in or tried to manipulate the situation."
Jack felt a surge of gratitude and humility.
I realized that standing up for what is right is more important than winning a bet or proving myself. Your strength,
It taught me that.
It is good that you have learned that. The world is full of people who value money and appearance over honesty and effort.
here, on this land, the measure of a person is their actions and their character. Today, you have shown both. As the afternoon light began to fade, Jack and Clara walked toward the barn, checking on the animals one last time. The land was calm, secure, and thriving under their care. Jack felt a deep satisfaction, not in accomplishment alone, but in understanding, in growth, and in connection. "Jack," Clara said as they reached the barn, "there is one final truth you must know. The ranch, the land, and the work I do here, this is not just my life. It is a part of something larger. My husband dreamed of a community built on trust and respect. I have kept that dream alive, and I hope to continue it." Jack looked at her, fully realizing the depth of her character.
I see now. Your vision, your dedication. It is inspiring.
I want to help, to learn, and to support it in any way I can. Clara studied him, noting the sincerity in his eyes. She had allowed him to enter her life cautiously, observing his actions, and now she saw a man who had grown, changed, and proven himself through effort, courage, and honesty. "You have come far," she said softly. "Perhaps further than you realized. If you continue on this path, you may find more than just respect. You may find trust and even partnership.
But remember, it must be earned every day, not assumed." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words.
He had come to the ranch thinking of a wager, of a game to test his charm and confidence. Now he knew that the true test had been of his character, his patience, and his willingness to grow. As night fell, the stars emerged in the clear western sky, casting a gentle glow over the ranch. Jack and Clara completed the final chores, their movements synchronized through shared effort and mutual respect. The land was calm, the animals safe, and the fences secure. Jack stood beside Clara, looking out over the fields. "I've learned more in these days than I ever imagined," he said quietly, "and I've realized that the real reward isn't winning a bet. It's earning trust, respect, and understanding. You've shown me that, Clara. Thank you." Clara placed a hand on his arm, a rare gesture of warmth and acknowledgement. "You've done well, Jack. Today you've proven that growth, courage, and sincerity matter more than wealth or bravado. That is a rare quality, and I see it in you now." For the first time, Jack felt a deep sense of belonging. He had arrived at the ranch with arrogance and a wager, but he was leaving with humility, respect, and the beginning of a true connection with a remarkable woman. Clara, in turn, had observed his journey, noting his growth, sincerity, and effort, and had begun to trust him in a way she rarely trusted anyone. The night settled over the ranch, quiet and peaceful. The wind whispered through the trees, the animals rested, and the land lay calm under the silver glow of the moon. Jack lay in the guest room, reflecting on the days that had passed, the lessons he had learned, and the woman who had taught him so much. Clara, in her own room, thought of Jack as well. She had tested him, observed his actions, and seen the transformation that came from genuine effort and honesty. She remained cautious, but the seeds of trust and respect had taken root. Perhaps, she thought, this man who had come into her life with a wager could become a true partner, someone who shared her values, her vision, and her dedication to what truly mattered. And so the story of Jack Hollister and Clara Monroe came to a close, not with victory in a wager, but with growth, understanding, and the beginning of a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. The Wild West stretched endlessly beyond the ranch, filled with challenges, opportunities, and promise. Together they had faced trials, learned lessons, and discovered truths that would shape their lives forever.